Welcome to the second video, Alternative Processes for Leadership Development. So how do you develop a leadership team? The interaction between Jesus and Peter, where Jesus tells Peter that he will no longer be a fisherman, that he will fish for people, is a really eloquent statement about what we do to develop leadership teams for community organizing. We fish for people. Now, if you've ever fished, when you're fishing, if you hold the line too tight, it's going to break and you're going to lose the fish. If you hold the line too loose, the fish is going to get off the hook and disappear. So you have a rhythm of pulling tight and of letting go. And that is the rhythm that you need to do with the people that you're developing, with the team of people or the teams of people that you're developing, in order to end up with the kind of leadership team that you need to carry out effective community organizing. So you are working constantly on the intentional, with that fishing process, on the intentional development of the capacity and the commitment of each member of the group, and then the coordination of the group itself. So that little phrase is very important. You're always about increasing capacity and commitment. If anybody has ever been actively involved in discipling someone else, there is a similarity between that process, the process of discipling, of mentoring a person so that they grow in their discipleship, and the process of intentional leadership development in community organizing. I think of it as discipleship. It is integral discipleship. So what you do with that person as you are accompanying them and working on their capacity and commitment, Sen talks about in a nice little set of 4 words, and I've expanded those words a little bit, and I'm also going to give you some examples. So Sen says at the beginning is assessment, that you need to be really clear about who the person is that you are focused on accompanying in their development. What are their strengths, their weaknesses, as much as they know. Very often your average person doesn't know very much about who they are. But you just want to start with understanding what a next natural step would be for them in their development. The next step always starts with an assignment that you have to ask them to. You don't learn community organizing abstractly. You learn it by doing it. And in fact, the first time that they asked me to teach a course on community organizing, I laughed because I said, how can you teach a course on community organizing? Because you have to experience it. But of course, all of you are studying a community organization, and that helps. And I tell a lot of stories, and I think that helps empathetically. But there really is no substitution in the end for doing the work. So the person has to have an assignment. The assignment has to, in some way, feel easy enough for them that they'll do it. I love the quote from Frederick Buechner, that vocation is where the world's deep hunger and your own deep gladness meet. And we talked about that last week a little bit in the recruitment process. So the initial assignments have to have some amount of gladness in it. It has to be something that people enjoy doing. But if it's only glad, it's that very loose string that the fish can slip right off of it. It has to be significant. It has to be an assignment that helps them grow, in their capacity and or their commitment. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of what that looks like. One example was there was an intern that we had in one organization that I ran, and she was very smart and she was very passionate, but she was very shy. And I had her shadowing an organizer, and she was going to shadow that organizer to a church where the organizer was going to do a presentation about the campaign. And the organizer woke up in the morning really sick. And so I said to her, so you're going to do it without him. And she went white. She said, I can't do it. And I said, if you don't do it, there will be nobody to do it. And it will not be done. And maybe that church will not get involved in responding to this really significant problem in the community that you care about. I said, so do the best you can. So she went and she spoke, I said, tell them that this is your first time, and she did. And she came back walking on air. She said, I did it. She had grown in her leadership capacity. Any assignment that people take in the process of their development should push their boundaries a little, should help them grow. And by the way, that is the biggest gift that you can give another person, is to help them grow into who God is calling them to be. The word mitzvah, from what I understand from my Jewish friends, means both commandment and blessing, because when you obey a commandment, there is a blessing in that. When you get a step closer to becoming who you are called and created to be, there is a great joy. All the angels sing, and there's something deep in you that sings also. The other story I want to tell you has to do with the picture of this beautiful woman that you're seeing here named Dolores Huerta. And in the movie that you're seeing, you will see an actor playing Dolores Huerta. You're seeing the Cesar Chavez movie this week. And you're watching, actually, this process of leadership development for community organizing. But you won't, the movie doesn't contain the story that I'm going to tell you. And this is a very important story about what this assignment piece looks like. So when Dolores came to work with Cesar Chavez, she had been a school teacher. She was educated. She had never experienced the kind of poverty and injustice and deprivation that farm workers experienced in the United States at that time. And her task, the task that Cesar gave her, was to collect dues, because the Farm Workers Union did not want to be beholden to anyone. They wanted for the workers in the union to make the decisions, and therefore they couldn't receive grants, because then they would be beholden to the foundations. They couldn't receive city money. They couldn't even receive major donations, because they wanted to make the decisions. It was critical for the development of their leadership team for them to make the decisions. So organizers who were organizing full time had to live at the same level as the workers, but they had to live. And so they would collect a few dollars a day from every worker for the purpose of the organizer's survival. So Dolores was sent to collect the dues from the workers. And she went to this one house, and it wasn't even a house, it was a chicken shack. It was behind a house. And that was the address she was given. And so she went up to the house, and a teenage girl came out furious and said to her, I can't believe that you're here asking us for money. And she held up a little glass jar with $2 in it. And she said, you want $2? This is what we have to eat. This is all the money that we have to eat on today. How dare you ask for this money? So Dolores left, and she went back to Cesar, and she just told the story. And she said, I can't do it. I can't ask them for the money. So Cesar was quiet, and he looked down, and he looked back up at her. And you'll actually see the actor do this in the movie. He does a pretty good job of, this was a common gesture of Cesar's. He looks down, he looks back up again, and he says to her, Dolores, do you think that you're capable of carrying the cross? And she says, I hope so. I mean, I trust the Lord. If I have to, if I'm in that situation, I think I'll be able to carry the cross. And he said to her, then why do you think that these people can't? Why do you think that they're less able than you to carry the cross? They're probably more able than you to go carry the cross. He said, go back and get that money or leave the union. So she goes back with a very heavy heart, walking slowly, and the woman comes out and sees her coming and comes out and gives her the $2 and says, please forgive my daughter, she doesn't understand. So they win their struggle, they double their wages, and the girl comes up to her. They're all jumping up and down and laughing and crying, and the girl comes up to her and hugs her tight and says, thank you for believing in us. Thank you for not giving up on us. That's called an assignment. That's called stretching your boundaries so that you grow in your capacity and your commitment for this work. But, as Sen points out, you're not just left on your own to do this, that you have assistance. So Cesar was supporting Dolores in his own way, but often the way that assistance works, if that organizer had not been sick the day that Taylor had to step in, is that the organizer would have done the presentation with Taylor watching. Then they would have shared a presentation. Then Taylor would have done the presentation with the organizer watching, and then Taylor would have done the presentation on her own. So there's this process of accompanying and assisting people as they grow into their capacity. And then acknowledgement that you must always honor and celebrate people for their growth, because that's part of how we encourage people to keep growing. So that cycle is the cycle of leadership development for community organizing. You do have to it is a dance to ask people to invest and to risk, but not more than they're capable of and not less than they're capable of. Now, I've just described the process between an individual and an individual. So an individual, usually organizing happens in trees. There's the central leadership, and then they have 12, so to speak, and then the 12 have 12, and then the 12 have 12. So it happens in trees in terms of who you're discipling, who you're doing integral discipleship with. But it also happens in groups, because remember, it's the group that has to increase in its capacity and its commitment, its coordination, and its cooperation. So I call that collective mentoring. And groups start in community organizing with an organizer, or in the base Christian community movement, they were called pastoral agents, somebody who comes in to bring the group together. But if that person doesn't share leadership very quickly, the leadership of the group is never developed. So in the base Christian community movements, almost from the beginning, you had a number of people trained to be coordinadores and animadores. That were people who were trained to coordinate a meeting. And then the animators were people who held the inspiration role in the meeting. That if the meeting was flagging, if people were sad, if people were bored, that person would come in and awaken, fan the flame of the Holy Spirit in the meeting in a variety of different ways. And people were trained for those roles, for coordinator and animator and animador. It's not really animator, it's life giver, it's inspirer. It's hard to exactly define it in English. It's very clear in Spanish. But I was mentioning that the pastoral agent would have to share leadership. If the pastoral agent didn't share leadership, the group would actually die in the base Christian communities. That the group had to be able to go on from the pastoral agent, and then the pastoral agent would go to another group. So there are various ways that the people in the group encourage each other and mentor each other. I love Adrienne Marie Brown's image of starlings, of the birds that kind of sense each other and move together. That certainly is a process that happens. There's all kinds of mutual care that goes on. But there are also some very specific processes that groups do that create this sort of collective mentoring. John Wesley had something called the class, and the class was a base Christian community. And in the class, everyone every week in their meeting had to start by saying, what is the state of my soul? And that included, what is the state of my soul internally with God? What is the state of my soul in my intimate relationships? And what is the state of my soul in terms of the mission? What experiences have I had in the mission? What have I learned about myself? Where did I fail? How can I improve next week? So that kind of accountability was core to what was called the class and what developed leaderships in the slums of England in the first Wesleyan movement. Now, CSE is called Community Self-Evaluation. That was a process that in the base Christian community movement in the Philippines we did. Anytime that you had done an action, you'd come back from the action for the evaluation, but it wasn't just a general evaluation. Every person had to evaluate themselves. This is what I did in relationship to the action. This is what I did great. This is what I did not do well. And then people would give them feedback. Yeah, that was true. That was great what you did. And yeah, you really screwed up on that one. But all of it in a spirit of a profound belief in the capacity and commitment of those people to grow. So it wasn't shameful. It wasn't, no one was shamed. It was, in fact, it was the opposite. It was the profound recognition that you could face the ways in which you had not been everything you want to be, because God was moving you forward into that. Popular education is the core, of the formal training that community organizing movements carry out to build these kinds of leadership teams. So you have the ongoing daily individual to individual and group, the weekly group trainings, just what goes on in the life of the group. But then you also have formal trainings, and those use popular education methodologies. So popular education methodologies in general are all about what I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is the way that the programming of the society, of an oppressive society, damages people profoundly in terms of their capacity and their commitment. So it creates psychological and spiritual damage that needs to be healed, that you see yourself through the eyes of the oppressor or the eyes of the oppressive system, and it disables you. So it really, by the way, it really does disable you. There was a study called the Rosenthal study done a number of years ago that I want you to know about. It was done in schools. You wouldn't be allowed to do it nowadays. But they took an elementary school grade, and they separated that grade into 3 classes. They separated it randomly. But they told the teachers that one class was slow students, and one class was genius, bright students, and that one class was random. The classes performed exactly as the teachers expected them to perform. The class that was supposed to be slow, they were slow. The class that was supposed to be brilliant, they were all brilliant. And the class that was supposed to be random was random. So these messages from society about what we are not and what we cannot do and what we cannot be are enormously powerful. And so our mind needs to be renewed, as we read in Romans 12. And popular education is the process of renewing your mind. So you have to look at the problems in your community, and you have to look at the root of the problems, and you have to realize some of the lies that you carry or the myths that you carry about those problems. And you have to realize in whose interests those myths are, because they often are in the interests of somebody else, not in your interest. And then you need to name the truth. And that's the process of concientización. That's what it's called in Spanish. So, let me give you a very simple example. If there is a woman whose child is not doing very well in school, what society tells her is that her child just isn't very bright. And, that's what she thinks about herself anyhow. It's what she thinks about her family. It's what she's learned. And she thinks her child is a burro. But what if she learns, what if she's sitting with some other mothers and she finds out that none of their children are doing very well in school? And then they go a little deeper and they begin to ask why. And they notice that the teachers aren't trained at their school, that it's mostly substitute teachers, and they don't have enough books for the kids. And so they have taken a private pain and they have begun to reframe it as a public issue, because it is a public issue. That is concientización. And then you can say, well, what is the truth? The truth is that maybe our children have a lot more potential if they had books and good teachers. So popular education is that process of awakening. Now, what I'm going to talk about is this process of healing the damage that is caused by oppression and perpetuates it. But I'm actually going to end this video, because it's so long, and just do a video talking about that process. Thank you.